Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. In this week's video, we're going to talk about how the province's efforts to create more housing through multiplex zoning might actually be in jeopardy for many properties in Metro Vancouver. Real quick before we get started, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. When I'm not making videos like this, I'm helping clients just like you buy and sell real estate across the Lower Mainland. So if that sounds interesting to you and you wanted to chat with me one-on-one, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. All right, guys, I want to hop right into it. First, for starters, if you're not familiar with multiplex zoning and what the province has done to essentially create more opportunities for more density, I'll link to a video here that talks about multiplex zoning. But just to give a brief summary, the province came out and said for all the municipalities across BC of a certain size, they had until July 1st, June 30th, I think actually, to update their zoning bylaws to allow for multi-units on a single family lot. So where that lot may have only allowed for a single family home, up to 6 units depending on where the proximity was to transit, size of lots, and they basically mandated this across the province. And since that happened, June 30th, majority of the municipalities said, yes, we're going to do this. They updated their bylaws. They were left with some freedom on their own to create certain things like FSR, how much square footage could be built on a site. That was left in the municipality's hands. But for the most part, this was all mandated. And, you know, obviously with a new process or a new legislation like this, there's going to be some hurdles and challenges that come up along the way. For instance, we had some municipalities say, we don't want to do this. We don't want the density. And for example, West Vancouver was perhaps the only municipality actually that outright rejected and said, we're not going to update our bylaws. We don't feel we should have to do this. And so they were playing a bit of a game of chicken with the province. And the province came out and said, look, you have 30 days to update your bylaws or we're going to do it for you. And surely enough, a week or two later, you know, West Vancouver complies. I haven't looked detailed at exactly how they have laid out their zoning, but I'd be curious to see what they've done with that FSR and with the other components to see if they've made it a little bit more restrictive. But you had some municipalities that outright rejected. You had some that asked for extensions, and many of those instances, those extensions were not granted. But now, in the last week or so, there's been a new sort of topic du jour when it comes to multiplex that, you know, has the potential of greatly reducing a lot of these multiplex opportunities across the Lower Mainland. And what it is, you know, on the land title, on the title of single family homes across Metro Vancouver, and just so you know, the title is basically the legal deed of the property. So the title will have, you know, if there's any mortgages on it, if there are any other financial charges on the property, if there is, for example, property taxes owing to the government, that can get registered on title. So the title gives you a lot of information about this property. But one of the other things that is on a land title, on a title, occasionally is a restrictive covenant. And what a restrictive covenant is when there's, exactly as it sounds, when there's some sort of restriction on the property. And one of these restrictions that developers would use back in the day, so if we go back often 20, 30 years ago, you know, you would have one developer that was building out a subdivision, right? So they would, you know, it's not, nowadays you see a lot of instances where, you know, one developer is building 1 or 2 homes, 2 or 3 homes, and then, you know, another developer down the street is building the next set of homes. But if you go back several years, and it was very common decades ago, is you'd have one developer basically creating a master plan community, almost like you hear master plan communities with these high rises, river district, with the high density, these communities. This was done at the single family scale decades ago. And so one of the things that these developers would do that were creating a whole neighborhood, 20, 30, 50 homes at times, is they would place what was called a statutory building scheme on the title. And what that was basically if you bought that home and in the future you chose to redevelop that property, you were going to be under a set of restrictions on how you could build out on that property. And very often it would say, if you are going to rebuild this single family home, it has to be a single structure. Oftentimes, the actual look, how your new development or your new building that you place on that site would be broken down in this building scheme, because the original builder wanted to maintain the look of the neighborhood, the vision that they have created. Another restriction that you might see in there is building height. Because perhaps that developer was building 2 phases. There's a phase behind. They want to protect views, so they don't want you to build too high. You could almost look at this building scheme as a second set of zoning, if you will. It's like zoning overlapping, layered on whatever the actual zoning was. Now, what makes this interesting in the multiplex discussion, the province comes in, they mandate new zoning. The building scheme supersedes any sort of legislative changes by the provincial government. So stories have come out in the last week or so. I'll give an example. Burnaby area, North Burnaby Government Road, we have a single family homeowner who basically discovered they're placing the property on the market, and they realized that their single family home, an older home, would have been very desirable for a developer to build multi-units on that site. But on the title of that property is a building scheme, statutory building scheme, restricting to a single structure. And so now these sellers are like, because this greatly diminishes the amount of buyers that may be interested in that home, especially right now where developers are looking for larger lots where they can build multi-units beyond the 3 or 4 units is where it gets juicy, or it gets worth it for the developer. And so they look at this and they say, wow, we're restricted. Now you might be asking, okay, well, this building scheme, how does it get removed? What's the process? The only person or entity that can remove this building scheme from the title is that original developer. And if you think about it, like I mentioned, a lot of this was more prevalent decades ago. That builder, where is that developer? Are they still around? Did the company dissolve? Is the builder even still alive to be able to remove this building scheme? So you have, this homeowner, this couple, they want to sell their property, and they're realizing, wow, this is not going to be enticing to a developer to purchase, because they have to have a single structure. And so they're going to the Supreme Court to say, hey, look, the province added this legislation. We don't think it's fair that we have this on our title that restricts to a single structure. And the article goes on to talk to some neighbors as well in terms of how they feel about it. And the neighborhood is torn, because some of these neighborhoods, like I mentioned, they've been protected single family neighborhoods. The neighbors are kind of torn. They're like, well, we feel bad for the neighbor, but yes, we do want to protect our area. We have a really nice home here on this large lot. Do we really want 8 or 10 units right next to us? So they're torn. And going to the province, I think this is the province didn't expect that this was going to become an issue, but this type of a land title, the statutory building scheme, it's on thousands of properties across Metro Vancouver, and so it's not insignificant. And again, it's in a lot of these areas that I don't want to say, I can't think of a better word, but maybe a bit more affluent, in the sense that larger lots, master planned single family home development communities. So these were meticulously planned out, and that's why you saw the building scheme that for years wanted to protect the future of how this neighborhood was going to look, very prime type of area. So circling back to the province is saying, look, it's correct. Like, our mandate to switch the zoning does not supersede anything that's a legality on title. And so even though the province says, no, you can build 6 units, if you have that restriction on your title, you can't do it. You could be stuck to a single structure. So now this couple is going to the Supreme Court to see how they're going to rule and whether they're going to be able to get that building scheme removed. Now, this isn't the only example. There's a subdivision, single-family subdivision in Coquitlam that could have been zoned as a land assembly, so assembling multiple properties, creating a high-density site, a high-value site with lots of housing. And apparently that subdivision also has these restrictive building schemes on title, and hence they can't come together as a land assembly to be able to create, high-density housing. So this is going to be a much broader issue than expected. And I don't think this was something that was foreseen, that this was going to occur. And so now the province is in a situation where they need to determine, is this something that they're going to have the ability to adjust, to remove these building schemes? And does that open up a whole other can of worms by allowing the province to come in and change these legal annotations on individual titles? So this is kind of snowballing a little bit, because I believe there's a lot of people out there that own single family homes that don't realize what is on their title. And as a real estate agent now, it's always been extremely important, especially with single family homes, to investigate title. But one of our first steps as agents has to be pulling that title and seeing if there's any sort of restrictions that go above and beyond the zoning, because ultimately that is going to dictate the value of your property. So if you're a seller watching this video, and if a lot of this speak is going over your head, just make sure you're working with a realtor that understands that this is one of the most important things that's going to dictate the value of your home. They are very easy to read on the title. You just have to pull the title and look for that restrictive covenant. But if it's there, it could affect the value of your home. Now, if you're in a newer home that's going to sell to an end user anyways, that a developer maybe is not gonna look at because it's too new of a home, perhaps the lot size is smaller, then you're probably okay, because the marketing efforts is going to go to that end user anyways, and they're not going to be as concerned. But especially if you're on a larger lot, an older property in one of these master plan subdivisions, if you do have that on title, it will affect your property value. As a buyer, if you're looking for something for future development potential, again, your agent has to be able to identify this and say, whoa, this is an issue now. This is something we need to look into. So it's going to be interesting, to see how the Supreme Court decides in this scenario, because obviously it's going to open up a huge can of worms. There's going to be a chain reaction, a lot of people applying to have these restrictive covenants removed from their title. It's going to be interesting to see how the province views it, because again, it is standing in the way of housing. It's not just about sellers getting the most value for their property, buyers being able to buy something with proper development potential. It legitimately is getting in the way of new housing units. And like I mentioned, anytime you have a new policy, new legislation, there are going to be some unintended consequences, or just blind spots that people aren't truly looking at, but they're going to come up early on. And this is something that's coming up early on. So something that I'm going to watch very closely, and I will update on this channel once we have more information surrounding it. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, hit the like button, because what that does is it takes the video and it sends it out to more people so they can also learn from it. And if you enjoy weekly real estate content, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss next week's video. And lastly, again, if you're in Metro Vancouver or the Fraser Valley, you want to chat with me one-on-one about your real estate situation, you can book me for a call, or you can just send me a text, give me a call, shoot me an email. All my contact info is in the description box. But I want to thank you so much for watching this week's video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.